Okay. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. For some reason, I wasn't able to log on to the webinar as easily as I have been in the past. So I really appreciate the fact that you hung in there and that you're ready to begin our first interactive webinar. And today I have a guest, Laura Wennekes from Amsterdam. And Laura has been a part of the APT community since 2008. And she's so graciously volunteered to help us bring core conflict formulation to life. And so, Laura, if you want to say anything, now's the time. Yeah.
I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me, Kristin. And I have actually two wonderful colleagues here with me, Anna Bartak and Malu Genevase, and we're joining the webinar together so we can discuss everything that comes up.
Great.
So we're
Hi, hello.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us. So today we're going to talk until about 2:45. It might be 8:45 in your time zone or 7:45. And our hope is that Laura and I will be able to do as many examples as we can to kind of bring the core conflict formulation to life. But in the meanwhile, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type your questions, and we'll be able to look at them toward the end of the webinar. And of course, I can't quite see where those questions, oh, there's the questions, okay. And so the reason why we try to do the questions toward the end is just so that we can get through all the curriculum that we have planned today. So, just to start, for those of you who are new to me and want to learn a little bit more about me and why I'm doing these webinars, here's some information. The most exciting piece that's happening in my life is that my new book, Paraverbal Communication and Psychotherapy Beyond the Words, is out, and you can purchase it at Amazon.com. And so I encourage all of you, if you want to learn more about me and how I work, to definitely pick up that book. And for right now, we are inviting people to join our core training in London and Boston. The Stockholm course is already full. And so, you know, if you have any interest in doing more intensive training in APT, the core training is the great way to go. And just go to the website to learn more. And of course, you can always email us if you have questions. But most importantly right now is our next webinar is going to be January 9th at 2 p.m. And in February, we will be having our first masterclass in London. And so if you just want to learn a little bit about the elementary aspects of APT, that's definitely the course to go to. And we'll be offering our Facing Your Fears workshop and our Listen with Your Eyes workshop, and then a new workshop called Transgenerational Affect Phobia, which I wrote down is happening in Boston, and it is, but it's also happening in Norway in April. So, just to begin with, it always helps to kind of keep in mind what we're focused in on today. And really, core conflict formulation is about you identifying defenses, adaptive affect, inhibitory affects, and learning how to explore the origin of an affect phobia. And we went over this last week, and so I'm just reviewing this just to kind of warm us up today for the examples we'll be going through. But, you know, for those of you who are a little bit more mature with APT, what that really means is, can you fill out the triangle of conflict? Can you fill out the triangle of person? Can you create a hypothesis that links the two triangles? And can you identify the pattern of affect phobia? Like, where did it originate from? Who is it playing out with? How is it playing out with in session? And my hope with this webinar, especially with the interactive piece, since Laura is here and going to help us out with that, is that you're going to really improve your ability to identify, you know, the different poles of each triangle, and then to collaborate with your client, because APT is really all about collaboration, and it's finding a hypothesis that makes sense to your client. And you know, this is the book that we're using for these webinars to help guide us, and the focus today is on chapter 4. And for those of you who come from the CBT tradition, you're going to find this chapter in this book very helpful if you want to learn more about the model and how we work. So just as a reminder, Malan's 2 triangles is really important with core conflict formulation. So when you see Laura and I working today, all that we're basically doing is filling in those triangles and trying to create a narrative that makes sense to the client. And the reason why we formulate is that we want to understand where an affect phobia comes from, how it's playing out with others, and you know, and when we share our formulations with their clients, a lot of times it actually helps them elicit affect and to get more in touch with their feelings. Sometimes it also does cause them to feel much more anxious too. And it certainly helps with motivation and focus for treatment. So formulation has like a lot of positive benefits that go with it. The only time that you're not really hitting some positives is if you have a formulation that's incorrect. But if you're checking in with your client and seeing if it makes sense to them, then you should be on the right path, and the formulation should really work. So simply as a review, Laura and I are going to be doing this all day today. You're basically identifying the current problem, you're creating the triangle of conflict, the triangle person, you're creating a hypothesis, and then you're checking in with your client to see if it's right. And your formulation is basically what you use to guide treatment. So because it is anxiety producing, like when you're doing a formulation, you are actually doing therapy, you know, because you're pointing out defenses. You're noticing for a rise in anxiety and you're ready to regulate it. And so it might be helpful to just have some good psychoeducation examples that you could share just to help your patient understand better the process, especially if they're experiencing a lot of anxiety. So, you know, quick review, you're looking at with inhibitory affect, why is the adaptive affect being avoided? With adaptive affect, what affect is being avoided? And with defenses, how is the adaptive affect being avoided? And so you're gathering that information as much as possible. And when you're talking out loud to your client, you're basically painting a picture so that they can see themselves and they can understand where their affect phobia came from. So here we are with our first example, and so Laura, are you ready for this? Oh, Laura, can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay, okay. So
yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. And so we've written out our examples because I know not everyone is you know, has English as a first language, and so I thought it would be good for us to like write it out so it's a little bit easier. So we'll start with example number 1, which should be our easiest one, and I'll play the therapist. Is that okay, Laura?
Sure. Go ahead.
So what problem would you like us to focus in on today?
Well, I'm a vice principal at school, and every time I try to speak in public, I freeze. So I'm really afraid I'll lose my job.
Can you describe the last time you froze and were unable to speak?
Oh, that was like last week sometime. I just completely blanked out.
Oh, wow. Can you describe a specific incident?
Well, I don't know why my boss keeps asking me to speak at the school when he knows that I have this problem. And last weekend I was at the podium and froze. It was so embarrassing.
At that moment, what were you feeling towards your boss? Excuse me.
I was feeling pretty angry at him.
Have you discussed how you feel with him?
No, I never would do that. I don't want to be a bother.
Is it typical for you to not speak up when you're angry?
Yes, my parents taught me that it was rude to speak up. You know, children are expected to be quiet, but never heard.
How has not speaking up impacted you?
Well, my boyfriend broke up with me because I wasn't able to communicate with him.
Wow. Okay. So right there, Laura, great job, by the way. So we're just going to pause right here, and we're going to look at the triangle of conflict right there. And so, we have someone who's definitely seen themselves as a victim, and that comes through when the patient's saying, like, I don't know why my boss would do this to me. Like the boss is punishing a vice principal, by asking them to speak at the podium. And then the patient saying, I freeze. Um, we put, I'll lose my job. There's definitely anxiety around I'll lose my job, but a lot of times, the I'll lose my job also acts as a defense. Like I can't get up and speak, so therefore I will lose my job, and it creates a wall between the person and the other people. And so also we have the defense of I don't want to be bothered. And so far we would guess that this was a block to anger assertion, a block to self, and a block to self-other, and the anxieties around shame and fear of losing a job. And so if we look at the triangle of person, the patient said, my parents believe that children should not be seen, should be seen and not heard. And so that goes on the past pole. And then on the current pole, we would have the principal, and apologies for my typo there, and the boyfriend who broke up with her, and then the therapist, which would be me in this case, and any other past therapist would be with the triangle of person. And so, once you have those two triangles filled out, then you're going to begin to build a narrative with your client. And so you present your formulation as a suggestion and help your clients see how their problems may be linked to avoidance of a specific feeling. And then also, as you're building the narrative, you want to explain how the affect phobia is a learned reaction. It's really, really helpful for people to understand that it's a learned reaction, and that it could be, the affect phobia can be unlearned too. They can go back to what they are naturally capable of. And always you want to be asking for collaboration and saying, is this true? What's missing? So in this example number one, are you ready, Laura?
Yes.
So I'll begin again as the therapist. I wonder if there's a link here between your difficulty in sharing your feelings and your public speaking phobia. And so I'm just wondering, in a broad terms, like is the speaking phobia linked to not really being able to express feelings? And oh, sorry, Laura, the patient.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. And so we get confirmation that that could be true. So then the therapist will say, maybe because you were taught to be seen but not heard as a child, you didn't develop the skills that you need to communicate in relationships, which makes it harder to get on stage and to talk to an audience. Does that sound right?
Yes. What can we do to change it?
Great. And that happens a lot, is like there's a confirmation, but then there's also an increase in motivation, like let's get to the root of this. And I can't tell you how many times that I've done a formulation and have just watched motivation increase and increase and increase. So the therapist would say, we can start by helping you learn how to experience and express your feelings, most particularly your anger. And so, voila, we have the focus for treatment. So thanks, Laura, for that one. So now we're just going to real quickly go to defenses. And I talked about this last week, but you really want to be listening and to your client, but also watching your client for the paraverbals, and then also paying attention to your natural instincts as your patient describes a specific example. And paying attention to your instincts, when, particularly when someone's showing defenses, is sometimes you get a gut feeling that something's off. It might be hard to see, it might be hard to hear, but it's like a feeling that you have. And if you trust your gut reaction, then you might be able to discover a defense that is actually very hidden and but important to discover. And so, you're looking for anything that demonstrates avoidance, that's quirky, that's a little bit off. And so just as a reminder, that's where the defense pull is, and you're going to be writing any behaviors, affects, or thoughts that are defensive and that are helping your client to avoid access to an affect and the positive behaviors associated with it. And, when you're working with defenses, just think about increasing your patient's awareness, just pointing out to your client when you see a defense, regulating the anxiety, looking at their reaction together, and asking permission to continue the process. If you think that I'm just going to help them increase their awareness, it makes the job so much easier because, that's really what we're doing here. And so example number 2, formulation. So I'll start as the therapist. You just lowered your head when I pointed out how you smile when you're talking about something sad. Is that hard for you to hear?
Yes, it's hard when someone pays attention to me.
Okay. So, I mean, for the audience, just so you know, when you hear someone say it's hard when someone pays attention to me, you're looking at a block to sense of self and a block to self-other. And typically there's other affect blocks that come after that. So then as a therapist, what is the hardest part right now? Let's slow down until you feel more comfortable with this process. And so when you're seeing a real spike in anxiety, and it might be too much anxiety, you want to give yourself permission to slow down the process. Beautiful things can happen when you slow down the process, especially if you're comfortable working with silence and you're comfortable like really just following someone as they try to figure out what's going on for themselves. So now we're going to look at adaptive affect. And just as a reminder with affect phobias, sometimes a client's conscious of their affect phobia, sometimes they're unconscious. That's why you have to really do a great job with those triangles. And but an easy way for you to discover what affects are being avoided is for you to just ask yourself or ask your client, what feeling could they be experiencing that could be helpful, that could resolve their problem. And I've gotten a lot of leeway by asking people like, what if you weren't being anxious right now, if you weren't being defended right now, what would you be feeling? And people really are comfortable and able to say exactly what feeling they would be feeling. They're good at identifying the affect phobia sometimes. And so, so that's a great question to ask. But again, here's the feeling poll, and that's where you fill in the affects that people are avoiding. I also fill in affects that people have connection with, because a lot of times you can work with an affect that they have connection with and then move to the phobic affect with no problem. So here's another example again, therapist. If you were to be true to yourself and you were to let go of the anxiety and obsession around getting a raise, what would you be doing?
I'd be talking to my boss and asking for that raise.
Let's see if we can help make that happen for you. Okay, so it's real easy there, because the person's able to identify what's missing, and you're able to use that in order to help create a focus. So here's example number 4. If other people have been through all that you have, do you think they should be so hard on themselves?
Certainly not.
What would it be like to offer you the same compassion? And you see, like right there, this is the working the triangles piece, and I didn't realize it until I read it. We're kind of drawing compassion to the patient, and seeing if they would be more compassionate to someone else than they are with themselves, and And in this case, the patient is able to be more compassionate to others. And then you kind of move down to the feeling pole by just saying, what would it be like to offer yourself the same compassion? You know, if they can do it for others, then they can do it for themselves. But you just have to kind of open the idea. So now real quick, inhibitory affect. You know, again, inhibitory affect causes someone to pull away from an adaptive affect in the healthy behavior. And if the inhibitory affect gets too high, it gets too uncomfortable, then you'll see a defense come and into play. And so here's how you write it on the poles. Okay, and here we go with another example. It's example number 5. Okay, me as the therapist. What would be the hardest part about letting yourself feel sad over your brother's death?
Well, I wouldn't want everyone to see me looking sad or down. I usually keep a stiff upper lip.
Right, right. So, you know, this is a person who's really guarded with how they look, and you know, and they're afraid of others seeing them look sad or down, and so they keep the defense the upper lip. So therapist says, what would be the worst thing about looking sad?
I guess I worry that they get mad at me. I remember my mother getting mad at me if I got sad after my dad died.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, even this is an example, but it definitely makes me feel so empathetic to the person, because there's like this real worry that others will get mad at her if she shows her real feelings. And the reason why has to do with a past loss, you know, where the father died, and then the mom got angry when the client was you know, experiencing her feelings. So so yeah, if we go back here, I kind of wish that we just did the triangles for this example, because it would be a really nice way to see the triangle of conflict and the triangle of person. But we'll have more of those coming up. So so just reminders, you know, formulation is essentially a working hypothesis, and it doesn't need to be perfect or right. It kind of just needs to get you on the right path. But there is a sense that you need the patient to be like, yeah, that's definitely right, or we're warm, or that's pretty much close to the truth. I mean, and you can see them kind of light up inside of them when a formulation's on the right track. But keep in mind that the formulation is really about collaboration, and it's about, you know, looking at the defenses, inhibitory affect and adaptive affect together. And so we'll start with example 6 here. And the therapist says, this is what I think might be happening for you. What do you think?
I don't think it's quite the way you described.
That's always a bummer when that happens. Let me hear from you how you see it. It's not valid until it rings true to you. And so this example is just something that you can use if somebody says, nope, that's not right, or we're off target. You know, a lot of times I do a lot more exploration at that point, and I'll just say, okay, what did I miss? And you know, what was right? And I'll literally take out the triangles and I'll cross out things that I put on the triangle, you know, with the hope of doing the 2 triangles will get me to the formulation. So, you know, you are going to be doing formulations, you know, within a session, throughout treatment. And, you know, what's really fascinating about formulations is that the more affect exposures you have, the more memories that come to the surface, the tighter your formulations can become. And, you know, I tend to, you know, there is a part of me that thinks that, you know, a client will tell you within the first 5 minutes of treatment, you know, what the problem is, and sometimes even where it originates from. And so, you know, I'm always listening to the first 5 minutes of treatment, to the first 5 minutes of a session, you know, but I have to say that, you know, as treatment goes on and formulations get tighter and tighter, I always do see like some data in that first 5 minutes of treatment and first 5 minutes of session, But it's not as like vivid and detailed as it is after you've done a lot of affect exposures with the client and you've really come up with a formulation that's very strong. So Laura and I are going to start talking about, we're going to focus on two examples here and get a little bit more in depth for you so that you can see it. So I'll start as this therapist. Do you think your symptoms increased because of your diagnosis of colon cancer and your inability to soothe yourself?
No, not at all. It's because my daughter didn't come home for Christmas, and I was furious.
Oh, were you able to talk about it with her?
No, I'm afraid if I do, then she'll get mad at me.
Okay. All right. So, you can see there's a lot of data here for both the triangle of conflict and the triangle of person. And so, um, and, uh, and so actually I'm going to go back once. So, for those of you who are at home, you could actually just real quickly write the triangles for this. And so the therapist was looking to see if a patient had difficulty with soothing herself. The therapist was thinking that was the block. But then the patient is saying, no, not at all. It's because my daughter didn't come home for Christmas. And so obviously there's a conflict with anger assertion because, the person's furious, but didn't talk about it with her daughter and then also experienced this, increase in symptoms. And so here we go with example number 8. The therapist says, can you give a specific problem you would like help with?
On the outside, everything looks perfect. I have a job, a house, a wife, a baby on the way, but I can't bear to be alone. My wife went away this weekend and I couldn't stay at the house alone, so I went to my brother's house and then out with friends that I really don't like. Usually I just keep busy so that I don't think too much and let my thoughts wander.
Okay. And so if we look at the triangle of conflict here, we can see the defenses are, I can't bear to be alone. I couldn't stay alone in my house. I went out with friends I didn't even like. I worked to keep myself busy and not let my thoughts wander. And so, there's a question, is there a block to positive feelings of the self here? Is there a block to self-care? I didn't write it there, but I definitely would be looking at a block to self and a block to self-other. And then the anxiety we don't really know. Is there anxiety, guilt, shame, pain? And so, just to, look at this example more with a little bit more focus here. The therapist might say, so you go to great lengths to be alone, but at what cost? On one hand, you get to avoid being alone by being constantly stimulated, but on the other hand, it sounds exhausting. So that's actually a really wonderful response that a therapist might have when the patient's talking about their defenses. And so with the feeling, the therapist could say, how could you feel better when you are alone? What gets in the way of enjoying yourself when you are alone? Okay, and on the inhibition poll, the therapist might say, why is it so difficult to be alone? What is the worst thing about it? So, as a therapist, you're going to be coming up with these formulations in your mind. And with this one, the patient definitely requires constant stimulation, whether it's through work or other people, because he's unable to calm or take care of himself when another type of when he's alone. Perhaps this is due to shame, guilt, or possibly contempt and disgust about himself. But what the therapist might say out loud to the patient is, why is it so difficult to be alone? What is the worst thing about it? And so the therapist is going straight to the anxiety pool to understand that a little bit more. So how are you doing, Laura?
Great.
Okay, all right. So we'll try this one more example, and then we'll kind of open it up, so it's a little bit more interactive here. So you've just told me that freezing in social situations is the main problem you would like me to help you with. Could you describe the last time you got anxious and started blushing like you just described?
It was yesterday. I felt completely awkward and ashamed.
Could you describe a specific incident?
Well, my boss came into my office and told me he received the results of my exam, and he congratulated me with the high marks. It was so important for me, but I couldn't reciprocate his enthusiasm.
At that moment, what were you feeling towards your boss?
I felt proud of my achievement, but in that moment it was too overwhelming that he came up to me to point it out. I found myself trembling and my heart beating in my chest.
So it sounds like when someone draws attention to an outstanding performance that you start. Oh, when someone starts drawing attention to an outstanding performance, you start feeling ashamed and anxious, and then you avoid contact and look away.
Yes, that's right.
That right? So at this point, we have like the triangle of conflict, even with the typos. And so now we're going to look to see how it connects with the triangle person. So the therapist says, so what would be the hardest part of letting your boss see how proud you are and to share it with him?
I would feel vulnerable and afraid that he would see my true feelings and he would ridicule me for feeling proud.
Is that something that's happened to you in the past?
Yes, I remember my brother making fun of me when I came home with high grades from school, and my parents would laugh together with him.
Can you see what you've described to me? Let me say it back to you so you can agree or revise it. And we're going to pause right there and just look at the triangles here. And look at the anxiety pool. There's, anxious, blushing, trembling, heart beating, shame. This is a really, really anxious person. And we see it as a block to self and a block to self-other, and that would mean a block to positive feelings too, and then freezing and looking away in avoidance. And so here we are with the defense pole here. And I wrote the therapist says, so it sounds like when someone draws attention to an outstanding performance you feel proud of, you start to feel ashamed and anxious and then avoid contact and look away. And so that would be a way that you can formulate it. And then here's the feeling pole. We can use the same phrase. So it sounds like when someone draws attention to an outstanding performance you feel proud of, you start to feel ashamed and anxious and then avoid contact and look away. All right. And then here we are with shame and anxiety, and we can use the same phrase for that, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's a nice formulation. And then, and here we have the triangle of person. And so let's look at the formulation. So I would say to the patient, it seems that you freeze or become avoidant when sharing feelings of pride and joy about yourself and your achievements with others, because your brother and your parents ridiculed you when you were young, and this has made you afraid of showing your feelings. This is what I think might be happening. Does that sound right?
Yes, that feels right.
Okay, all right. So at this point, we're almost at the end of the PowerPoint. Laura, how did that feel to you? I know we weren't really looking at each other. We were reading off the PowerPoint, but...
It's a little awkward, but it's fun to hear and do this with you.
Totally. And I mean, if you're open to it, I would love for us to just do something impromptu because it's so much more natural. Would you be willing to be your client like impromptu so that people can see like what it really looks like?
Next time, you mean?
What's that?
Next time?
Oh, next time. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so I won't put you on the spot today then. So yeah, I mean, I hope everyone got a sense that, when the patient's talking, you want to really be noting the anxiety, the defenses, and then the affect that the person's avoiding. But then you want to get a sense of like, where did this come from? And so, because it's not like people just arrive with conflicts. It typically comes from childhood. There are some cases that people have had like traumatic experiences in their adult life, and they develop a phobia from that too. So, you know, it's I'm hoping that you were able to see a little bit more, you know, but of course you have to watch video in order to like really get a true sense of it. And so right here, you know, we're going to, you saw the slide from last week, but you know, in order to do this, you have to really practice, and you have to be able to practice with other people, and to just get a real sense of like how to do the triangles and how to formulate. And the more you practice, the easier it gets, without a doubt. So what I'm going to do at this point, Laura, is I'm going to open up the questions and see what questions people might have so far. Oh dear. Okay, so here we are. As you become more experienced with APT,